Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
It's almost time, kids. The clock is ticking. Be in front of your TV sets for the Horathon. And remember the big giveaway at 9. Don't miss it. And don't forget to wear your masks. The clock is ticking. It's almost time.
Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock. Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween.
Happy Halloween. You've reached a fright-tacular edition of The Signal Watch. I'm your ghost, Ryan Steens. Most episodes, we discuss movies, television, comics, and more. But for Halloween, we're asking you to join me and my co-ghost, Spooky Simon, for a horrifically fun 5 episodes of Halloween frights. This year, we're talking horror sequels, the movies they made to catch lightning in a bottle one more time, and maybe make some cash along the way. And we'll try to put it all in perspective. Stay terrified. We're gonna try to make this weird.
Everybody, and welcome to the Signal Watch, and happy Halloween. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me this spooky day is Spooky Day.
Hello, it's me, yes, Spooky Day, hello. On this cold October morning, honest governor. We're actually doing this in July. So we're ahead of schedule.
Someday I need to share the schedule with people so they understand, like, we're currently doing this in July for Halloween so we can be ready for Christmas by December 1st.
We're on Lilo's in a pool drinking cocktails recording this in the heat of summer.
But yeah, it is July 30th to give you guys an idea of when we're doing this. But we're feeling very Halloweenish because we watched 2 Halloween sequels to the original John Carpenter's Halloween.
We did. We watched the original Halloween 2 from 1981, directed by Rick Rosenthal. And then we watched Halloween 3 from 1982. A lot of numbers in this. Halloween 3 from 1982, directed by Tommy Lee Wallace. So like you said, that's the original 2 sequels, not to be confused with the Rob Zombie stuff, and not to be confused with what's going on now with David Green's trilogy.
And part of why I wanted to watch this is I plan to watch. I've not yet seen the new continuation of the Laurie Strode story by David Gordon Green. And just as a cool Ryan point, I didn't know him particularly well, but David Gordon Green lived on my floor my freshman year at UT Austin. He was a nice fellow who carried a banjo around a lot, is my memory of him. I'd heard about these sequels, of course, my whole life. Part of what had turned me off from ever watching them was in college, I went to go see Halloween 6, which was a whole other podcast worth of mess.
Is that the one with Paul Rudd putting faces?
Maybe I'm a jerk about talking in movies. Like, you do not do it. Like, if you're going to talk, take it somewhere else. I don't tolerate it.
You get quite angry, and I've been with you when you've shouted at people.
Yes. And I talked in the entirety of Halloween 6. I did not care for it, and I let the theater know.
You
and I was
probably would have
stone
been
cold
more
sober.
entertaining than Halloween 6, to be honest.
Well, people were really grumpy with me at first, and then they all joined in, and then we were having a conversation about Halloween 6 while it was unspooling. Uh, so, but Halloween 2 and 3, we have seen. They're very, very different movies. I really like what the idea was that John Carpenter had for making a new Halloween 2 is a direct continuation of Halloween, and we can talk about that. Halloween 3 was supposed to be the start of Halloween as a franchise, where they basically did it as an anthology series, and every Halloween they'd put out something new that was a completely different, unrelated story. So let's hear your thoughts on Halloween 2 first, Simon.
Well, it was very interesting watching them back to back yesterday. And I guess like my first impressions, having not seen them for a couple of years, is Halloween 2 was kind of a slog, to be honest. It was a bit hard to get through. It really dragged, especially the middle of it. And whereas Halloween 3 I still love and have always loved. I think that's partly because I saw Halloween 3 when I was very young on TV. It must have been when it was shown on TV a couple of years after it was made. And I actually had the paperback. Do you remember the days before the internet where you had to buy the paperback to get more information on the film you liked? And then since then, I've got a dodgy old poster, and I've had some T-shirts of Halloween 3. And of course, it stars the governor, Tom Atkins, the man who can, every time they stop, he orders beer and chain smokes and can still pull gorgeous 20-year-olds. So respect to Tom Atkins.
And you see more of Tom Atkins in this movie than you were ever wanting to see of Tom Atkins. But
I think this is where my love of Tom Atkins, more than the fog, I think this is where my love of Tom Atkins comes from, because I'm like, I want to be a doctor after seeing how doctors act. They act like very out of shape James Bonds, basically.
Yes.
But yeah. But whereas Halloween 2, I didn't see maybe even until the early 2000s. And it's funny because if you kind of sat me down and said, as a child, which were the most memorable video covers you remember from rental stores and, posters, I would say Halloween 2 definitely is in the top 5. Because I remember always kind of like just standing there looking at it going, I bet that's a great film. But for some reason, it was never shown on TV, unlike the original Halloween, which I saw pretty young, probably too young. So I didn't see it until the early 2000s. I got a great Sanctuary DVD with a hilarious commentary on it by Kim Newman and Alan Jones, two English kind of like film kind of like critics who, give a lot of information, but also kind of definitely laugh at it's kind of like its weaknesses. And basically, like I say, yesterday, I found it a bit hard going. I mean, I respect the fact that it carries straight on from Halloween. And actually, a couple of days ago, before I even watched it, the first thing I was going to say was, this is one of those rare films like Quantum of Solace that carries on minutes after the last episode. And then I looked up on the internet, and there's hundreds of films that do that. Rocky does that. The Evil Dead does that. So actually, it's not that original. So I guess to rephrase that, I guess it carries on almost the same story by recapping. So it goes back 5 minutes and shows you the end, even though it's a reshoot, actually, because he falls into the front lawn this time instead of the back lawn, like he did in Halloween. Right. So interesting. But, they kind of almost like remake the end of Halloween a little bit different. And then, boom, we're off running into the new story.
Yeah, I actually was thinking about that same point last night, and was comparing it mentally to, so two of my favorite movies of all time are Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, and those also follow immediately afterward.
What happened?
Although then there's a pause. There's like a pause of like 3 or 4 months in Frankenstein to Bride of Frankenstein, but it does start after the windmill burns. Bride of Frankenstein does.
I think that's the difference. There's not even like an hour's lapse here. Yeah. You literally are the same stories continuing.
So yeah, basically what it ends up doing is saying, okay, you've already had 3 acts maybe in the first movie, and now we're going to add acts. And I would not say there's 3 acts in Halloween 2 because there's no introduction. They're just carrying on. So it almost like it adds acts 4 and 5 to the 3-act movie. I think the thing it does that is maybe the most interesting by accident, and it doesn't make the movie better, is, to me, the hero of Halloween 2 is Michael Myers. Because there's no other characters in that movie. Laurie Strode...
Least irritating. So.
Well, Laurie Strode just lays in bed. I checked at the 45-minute mark. I was like, or halfway through the movie, you have Jamie Lee Curtis, who's like a generational talent.
Yeah.
Who they don't give any lines to and just lays there looking catatonic.
Well, also, they stick her in a bad wig. And she, like you say, she spends, it's a very thankless role for her because after the first film where she's pretty proactive, and really Loomis only turns up right at the end. You know, she has to deal with Michael Myers for a good 10 minutes, or 20 minutes. You know, with this, she's literally in bed and then she spends the last 10 minutes crawling around.
Yeah. I mean, if they condensed it, it would have made a reasonable extension to the original film of like, okay, she's not safe just because, she exits her house. Now she's in a hospital and he's still chasing her. There's another 30 minutes that we're going to do of Halloween. But it doesn't make any sense as a feature film because they don't ever really give you a POV character because Loomis is barely, he's in it, but he's in it for maybe 20 minutes of the runtime. They kind of give you a POV character in Lance Guest, who is actually pretty good for what he's given. I mean, he's a skilled actor, but you have like the horn dog EMS guy, and then you have the horn dog nurse, who's his friend.
Well, there's all these characters you don't give a shit about. And I think the difference is, this is like kind of Jaws 2, where it's like, what if a less talented director tried to tell the same story? Oh, well, you wouldn't have the magic, right?
Yeah. That's it in a nutshell.
I mean, it's you got all these characters you don't care about, and there's almost like soap opera plot in the middle, and they obviously have been watching Star Wars because they're like, the big reveal is he's actually your older brother, Michael Myers, which the nurse, goes like, I've got a secret, Donald Pleasance, that, you don't know. And he's like, I know everything. I saw him 6 times. I saw him 6 times. And stop saying that, Donald. And then, and you're like, oh, okay. And if anything, I think it diminishes Michael Myers, a little bit, And the fact that Laurie doesn't remember any of this or only remembers it in hospital is kind of ridiculous,
Yeah, my understanding is in the new movies that are continuation, they dismiss the idea.
Yeah.
Like they bring it up and go, nah, that's an urban myth or something like that.
It's interesting watching these films back to back because John Carpenter didn't want to do Halloween 2. And he himself said, I got drunk over a weekend drinking beer and wrote the script and bashed it out and really didn't enjoy doing it. Whereas Halloween 3, even though, he was like more hands off, that was his kind of like, he wanted to do that. He got excited by that.
Yeah.
And I feel like you can feel that in the films. I feel like Halloween 3's got a lot more energy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the only thing that you can say towards Halloween 2 is it proved that people wanted more Michael Myers. I saw the budget on it was only like $2 million, so marketing was probably another $1 million at the time. It pulled in $25 million, which meant people were into this idea. They wanted more Laurie Strode. They wanted more Michael Myers.
It was the second biggest horror film after American Werewolf in London that year, I think, in America.
Wow.
And and I think that's also why Halloween 3 kind of crashed and burned, which I kind of understand because if you've had 2 parts of a franchise about a character. It's a bit like having like a third Alien film where the alien isn't in it. You can see that at the time, especially before the internet, before, because now we kind of get warnings about it and we get warmed up and we get ready for it. But like if it was just dropped and you went to see it, you'd be like, what is this? When you saw Halloween 3.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember these movies coming out because in 1981 or whatever, when Halloween, what year did Halloween 2 come out? 81?
Halloween 2 was 81 and Halloween 3 was actually just the year after in 82.
Yeah, I mean, I was like 6 and 7. I don't remember. I remember them existing kind of in the ether, but like horror movies were for the teenagers in my neighborhood. They were not for me at that time. I remember hearing in high school, oh yeah, Halloween 3 is crazy. It has nothing to do with Michael Myers. And me being like, what?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, it's about these crazy masks that like murder kids. And just being like, well, that sounds kind of interesting. And I'd meant to get around to watching it since high school, but 46 years old, finally watched it.
Well, I think Carpenter himself kind of later on regretted the kind of sister subplot, and this was very much like, he kind of had to make this instead of wanted to make this, and I think, yeah, like you said at the start, his real love was, I want to do an anthology film about Halloween every year or every other year, and yeah, the audience obviously said, no, we don't want that, so he went, okay, I'll go and do something else.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting watching Halloween 2 because it really, like I said, it turns Michael Myers, because he's really the only through line. You have Loomis running around like a maniac, but he's not on screen enough.
And this is where Pleasance goes from like panicky in the first film to full-blown psychosis, I think.
Yeah.
It's like the way when he's going around and he's like holding policemen hostage. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of does the pivot of, when you're watching Psycho, the first one, I remember watching a documentary on Psycho in college, and they talk about how brilliant it is because you are cheering for Norman Bates to sink the car and hide the evidence while you're watching the movie. Like, you're like, oh, he's got to get away with it. And it's like, that's psychotic. Like, you shouldn't be cheering for the bad guy to hide the body, right? And in this movie, because no one's established as a character, you're getting to that point, kind of like the Friday the 13th movies do, and eventually, I would not say the first Freddy movie, but eventually in the Freddy movies, where you're like, oh, how's he going to knock off all these people? Now, the problem is with this movie, you said there's this big lull, and there is. It starts off totally frantic because it's Donald Pleasance running around trying to find Michael Myers, and
I shot him 6 times.
Yeah, and he's in like people's backyards, and it has this great scene where he goes into someone's house while the woman's looking over her husband's shoulder.
That's nicely done, actually.
Yeah, it's a great. So I was at that scene like, oh, Halloween 2 might be okay.
Yeah.
And then he goes around just murdering his way through Haddonfield. And
it all feels like a lesser version of the first film, because like the first girl he does kill, that young girl who's like, well, that happened just up the road from me. She's almost like a kind of like, like a second-rate Annie again.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, and then like at the hospital, the most deserted hospital ever. Yeah. Not only the biggest hospital for a small town, right? But there's nobody in it. There's one kid comes in with a razor blade in his apple, which actually is a nice tie-in to Halloween 3. Somebody else. Obviously, there's another nutter out there doing stuff to kids. Right? Yeah. And there's a drunk doctor. So that's another tie-in to Halloween 3. That old doctor's like, give me some coffee, I'm pissed. But yeah, apart from that, you have all these characters just wandering around. I mean, the nurse has long enough. She's got so little patience. She can go and have sex in the hot tub for a couple of hours. I want to go to the hospital.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's clearly when they were writing it, no one thought about how do hospitals actually work. Does this bear any resemblance to reality? On Halloween night, Are we really going to have an injury-free evening? It's like, and the only doctor we have on call, it feels comfortable going out and getting tanked before coming in. It's I mean, I you don't go to these movies for reality or anything like that, but it's just does not, it feels very half-assed, once you get pretty much into the main plot of, what's going on in this hospital and who are the people. And then they're not defined well enough as characters. So when they do get bumped off one by one,
there's like fat security guard, there's like Randy nurse, there's Lance Guest's scumbag mate. And you're just like, I don't really care. These people just lined up to get killed, basically. It's like,
Yeah, and there was a nurse who popped into a scene. She's the one who finds the doctor with the needle in his face, and then she gets the needle in her temple. And I was like, where did she come from? I didn't even remember her from earlier in the movie. Like,
was
that
she the one on the walkie-talkie with the security guard?
I don't think so, unless she totally redid her hair between sequences.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the movie's got. Yeah, I mean,
also, it's like you gotta worry about any film that has a huge amount of exposition, and not only like in the first film, you kind of had Donald Pleasance doing that. Fair enough, Although I think he really overdoes it in this one because he keeps saying, "I saw him 6 times, right?" And it's like we know Donald, and but then also Michael Myers only knows where Jamie Lee Curtis is because some kid with a radio bumps into him while the radio is going, and the survivor, Laurie Strode, has been taken to the Memorial Hospital. And it's like, well, that was lucky. Otherwise, Michael Myers would spend the night wandering around the town, wouldn't he?
Well, apparently that was I read on the Wikipedias that was apparently a late addition that John Carpenter himself added. Yeah, because John Carpenter was editing the movie and was like, how does he know where she is? Like, oh, crap. And so they had to go shoot that scene.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like everybody, you've even got all these news reporters going, this is what's happened. And then you got the TV in the hospital going, this is what happened. And I'm like, this isn't good storytelling. This is like, this is very clunky.
It did also make me wonder if that there's a killer on the loose who is absolutely after somebody, would you share that information with the press so that they would relay it? Or would you be like, you know what? Let's hold off on saying where the person is until we find the guy. I mean, they don't even release the names of victims if they're a minor until, the families are informed.
I mean, I did like a nice touch was I like the crowd outside the house, the Myers house, like kind of stoning it. I mean, because I feel like in reality, because that house survives into Halloween Resurrection or Halloween 8, where they're filming like some spooky reality show in it or something, and of course he turns up and starts killing everybody. And I'm like, I may need to
watch that. That sounds great.
Oh no, don't. But that house would have been burnt to the ground. So at least that's a bit realistic, I think. And on the flip side, on the pro side, you have got a lot of the same team that did Halloween. So you've got Dean Cundy doing the cinematography again. You've got Carpenter obviously helped write the thing. You've got a lot of the same cast coming back, even for like pretty thankless little cameos. Like Nancy Loomis literally plays her corpse for like 2 seconds. And like Sheriff Brackett, her dad's in there for like 5 minutes at the start. And you've got Alan Howarth and John Carpenter doing the music. So there's a lot of connective tissue, but it really, really falls into I think just being unnecessary. It is more of the night he came home, but it's just, you don't really need it,
Yeah. So what is Michael Myers?
Well, I mean, interestingly, so I remember when I did film studies at university, we talked about this because I had a film professor who kept going on about the other. The other is like the supernatural. And so, for instance, Silence of the Lambs would be a thriller, not a horror film, because a horror film features the other and is supernatural, whereas a thriller, it can actually happen. However far-fetched, it could happen. So Jaws is a thriller. It could actually happen. You know, it's unlikely, but it could. Silence of the Lambs is a thriller. So interestingly, Halloween, I think like Friday the 13th as well, is a thriller until the very end, where he's shot and he manages to get up and walk off, because of course the real man wouldn't be able to do that. And it's interesting because I feel like it kind of wants to have its cake and eat it in Halloween 2, because on the one hand, you know, you shoot Michael Myers and he falls down, but he's obviously never dead. And even at the end, Jamie Lee Curtis, very crack shot, managed to get him in both eyes. I mean, by Halloween 4, he shrugged that off. He's obviously grown his eyes back or something. Or he's got very adept to being blind. So yeah, but I mean, I also found interesting the Sanheim reference on the blackboard, because I think that links into Halloween 3 nicely as well.
So, I mean, he doesn't have a, like, he drowned in the lake and he came back. He doesn't have a, you know, the parents burned him in the basement or anything like that. He's just a kid who flipped out and slowly, I mean, maybe he's just cursed.
Well, it's also funny, like, even in, like, you know, Green's recent Halloween movies, they seem to, like, try at the start of them to humanize him and go, he's just a guy who kind of went nuts and he's been locked up, and then he escapes, and then we locked him up again. But then as soon as he gets out and gets rolling, you know, the supernatural stuff piles up pretty quickly.
And I mean, and that's fine. I mean, if that's the answer, I just didn't know if, like, they've made 20 of these things or something at this point. If they ever were like,
I think they've said everything under the sun. I don't think they've quite gone as far as saying he's an alien, but they've basically said, you know, he's part of a cult and he's controlled by this cult and all kinds of different things that, you know, have led into dead ends. I think that's why the first Halloween works, though, because it's literally just a guy with a knife. At least to the very end, you know.
And I think that's such a great ending, though, for that film. It's kind of the thing of, over the years, of course, then feeling like, well, we've got to get more of this. We've got to squeeze more blood from the stone. And part of why I just avoided watching the sequels, but was willing to watch Halloween 3 because I knew it was unrelated. I'd watched Halloween when I was 14 with Justin at some point, and I remember just being like, this is amazing. I can't believe I waited, you know, these 14 years of my life to watch this movie. But yeah, Halloween 2 is probably the thing that opened the door then, I guess, for the rest of the sequels when they decided to start cashing in. I am not shocked after the success of Friday the 13th. And I guess by that point you have, you know, maybe 1 or 2 Nightmare on Elm Streets that they decide to start squeezing out.
Well, yeah. They're definitely like, who could we bring back? Who's got an established franchise who we could, like, extend? And it's interesting because, you know, the background of Halloween 2 is Rick Rosenthal basically tried to copy Carpenter by just making it, like, you know, spooky and lots of jumps. And Carpenter himself went back and put in some gore, which I would think is the hypodermic in the eyes bits. And probably the nurse in the hot tub getting, you know, pushed in the hot tub. Because he was like, you know, we have to compete with Friday the 13th. We can't do what I did before because, you know, it's not enough. We have to kind of like add gore to this. And I think they had a bit of an argument about that because, you know, the original director wasn't very happy about it. But I think he kind of made the right decision, Carpenter, because I think if this had been like the first Halloween, it would have been deathly boring, to be honest.
Yeah, you do, however, start getting into the, like, how creatively can we murder people bit.
He's got a scalpel now. He's got a scalpel now.
Yeah.
He's got a hypodermic.
Yeah. And then there's some effects in it that just don't work very well. I guess him walking through the glass door is supposed to be this big thing, but I'm like, but that's clearly a false glass door. Like, well, yeah. That doesn't look remotely like if you walk through a real glass door. You know,
well, also if it was a real door, he'd just bump it, wouldn't he? Because he's not going fast enough to like, you know. It's also like, I mean,
yeah.
he doesn't kind of do what he does in other films where he seems to teleport around, at least. But especially that bit where Jamie Lee Curtis is in I guess the boiler room or whatever with the lift. He's walking hilariously slow. And I know loads of people have done this joke, but it's like, hurry up, Michael. You can get her. Hurry up.
Yeah, if she just did some speed walking, she would have been completely safe.
Well, did you spot Dana Carvey?
No, I didn't. It was during the credits that I realized he had been in the film. I remember Dana Carvey from that era because I've seen Blue Thunder a couple of times.
Yeah.
Well, I think Dana Carvey might have been in the Blue Thunder TV show and not the movie, but
that's right.
I do remember 80s Dana Carvey pre SNL. So
yeah, because in the movie it was Blokey from Home Alone, wasn't it? Daniel Stern.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I like I say, I found it kind of hard going. Halloween 2, to be honest. I mean, it's definitely got some moments. I think the end's kind of great, although it's really stupid. And it's hilarious that in Halloween 4, Michael Myers has, mold scarring and Donald Pleasant's got a bit of a limp. And apart from that, they're fine.
Yeah.
They're like, we'll just carry on. But after the entire hospital blows up. But yeah, it's still a cool ending,
Yeah.
They could have left it there, and several Halloweens I have thought about putting on Halloween and this as a double bill, and I think the fact that I never have kind of like sums up why, really, because I'm just like, the original's enough,
Yeah. I mean, I can see doing it as at like a party or something of like, we're gonna roll straight from Halloween into Halloween 2.
Yeah.
If people aren't paying a ton of attention, but
yeah,
I don't know if it's kind of famously not good from everything I was reading about it. So it kind of
compared to the other sequels, it's actually kind of great, but that's not saying much.
Yeah.
That's a pretty low bar.
Yeah.
But let's talk about a much better film. Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, starring, like I say, the governor, Tom Atkins, as Dr. Dan Chalice, Stacey Nilkin as Ellie, and I'm going to mispronounce this, but he's fantastic, Dano Hurley as Connell Cochran, who's a brilliant villain. I love him.
And you'll know him from RoboCop as the old man if it's been a while.
I feel like he's better in this, and he's got more to do than RoboCop. I feel like this is almost like a Bond film, a weird Bond film.
So I was reading that he took his name off of it, but the guy who initially wrote the draft of this film, and it kind of made sense. Yeah, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so Nigel Neal was very famous in England because he created Quatermass. Mm-hmm. So the Quatermass TV shows for the BBC, which were huge in the 1950s, partly because there wasn't anything else to watch, but partly because they were very good. And then, of course, Hammer remade all of those for film in the 60s. And Nigel Neal kept going. He did like a great kind of like ghost story called The Stone Tape, which is very dated now, of course, in the 70s. But it's all about, actually proving the ghosts exist through science, through scientific means and computers. And he did like a great show that I've actually got called Beasts, which is like 6 episodes about animals doing sinister and weird things. And so he was a big influence on John Carpenter, and John Carpenter kind of names drops a lot of his stuff into his movies. You'll kind of see like little kind of references to Nigel Neal all through Carpenter's movies. So I guess Carpenter got hold of him thinking this was a great idea. And Nigel Neal did write this treatment. And unfortunately, what happened is I've actually seen Nigel Neal live once, and he is a very, very grumpy old man. Now he's dead, but when I saw him, he was exceptionally grumpy. So I don't think he's the easiest guy to work with anyway. And he likes kind of complete control, or did like complete control over his work. And what happened, of course, in Hollywood was he wrote this treatment, a lot of which still exists in Halloween 3. But Carpenter again, I think, went with Tommy Lee Wallace and added in some gore. So I'm guessing the misfire with Marge in the hotel room, what happens to the homeless guy when they get hold of him. I'm guessing those kind of things were added. And Nigel Neal kind of went ballistic and took his name off it and said it was like, disgusting and they'd ruined his script. I don't think so, because I think you can still feel his very English sarcasm coming through, and definitely all the Cochrane stuff, especially when he's talking about what Halloween really means. I think that's pure Nigel Neal.
Yeah, I think now there would be it'd be very trendy to call this movie Lovecraftian. It has a creeping sense of dread as they're kind of unpeeling the layers, which is very different from the tone of Halloween 1 and 2.
It's not a slasher. It's more like a kind of invasion of the body snatchers. It's like we're being taken over without realizing it.
Yeah. And it has kind of some really wild ideas that, Americans just aren't as creative, I think, with some of this stuff in their way as, I can see a lot of this stuff popping up on Doctor Who, right? We're going to replace people with clockwork people, from a toy maker. Like, that's something you'd see pop up in a comic book in this period. It would not have been something, and it would be very clunky when they did it. It would not be done in the same way in the US for the most part. So it felt to me.
Well, it reminded me a bit of the English TV show The Avengers, not the Marvel one, but the English one where they went out and investigated something weird's going on at this factory. People are disappearing. Or, to be honest, even standalone episodes of The X-Files,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that sort of tone in American stuff didn't really start showing up until the 90s, and that was partially because of a cross-pollination of a lot of Brits writing into American stuff, Americans finally picking up on that stuff and starting to incorporate it back in. But I think in the 80s, this would have been incredibly novel. I don't know how the audience would have reacted to taking something as childishly simple as we've got clockwork people.
Yeah.
But then making it totally horrific would have been new.
Well, there's so many ideas in this. There's almost too many ideas, because you've got the guys making kind of androids, who can't talk. I think that's a big design flaw, because they obviously bump into real people quite often. So they just stand there not saying anything. But then you've got all this kind of like, he's stolen part of Stonehenge, which he's got a great line in the film, a great get out clause for the script, where he goes like, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you how I got it here." And I'm like, that's great. He doesn't have to explain how he got it there. You've got all these kind of like, this kind of druid ceremony going on, and there's loads of stuff, and people disappearing or people getting killed horribly. And I remember seeing this as a kid, and it kind of blew me away. And it's nice that, a bit like a lesser version of John Carpenter's The Thing, this is slowly starting to get the respect I think it deserves in the last 5 or 10 years. I've seen this actually on the big screen at the Alamo a few times, and each time it gets a great audience reaction. People aren't laughing at it; they're kind of like they're having a good time with it.
Yeah, I think Americans have kind of caught up to a lot of this sort of stuff, and are willing to kind of take this. Here's a barrage of ideas we're going to throw at you. It's not, Michael Myers with a knife, and isn't it scary if someone tries to murder you, which is, full stop kind of the horror of Halloween. But the stuff here is the creeping terror and the kind of realization of like, okay, something sinister is happening up at this factory, but then it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
It also is the rare horror movie where, even though Tom Atkins is our final girl, he he doesn't save the day.
Well, does he? It's a lovely ambiguous ending, isn't it? Because it's like, but it's and it also mimics, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, or at least what was going to be the original ending of Body Snatchers. I think the studio made them tack on a happy ending, where it's like, we found the pods and we're going to wipe them out,
Yeah.
But like originally,
how they answered everything in the 50s, we're going to burn it. We're going to burn it to the ground.
We're going to blow the commies up. But originally that was going to end with Kevin McCarthy running down the road going, they're here, and it's kind of like, it's a great ending. I love that ending, and that song is so annoying. But it's kind of supposed to be annoying,
I mean, it is genuinely an enjoyable movie, and it's not like I was fine with Halloween 2. I kind of realized what it was, 30 minutes into it. But when I started going, has Jamie Lee Curtis moved yet? She's waking up. I came for the Jamie Lee Curtis. What's happening? But this movie, we're kind of Tom Atkins is a weirdly charismatic guy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get it. You look at the guy and you're like, someone's dad has stumbled into this movie and he's somehow the lead. But he's just likable as an actor.
Well, I had again that couple of critics who did Halloween 2 did Halloween 3 at the same time. So I bought that at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And their commentary for this again is hilarious because they pointed out quite how often Tom Atkins stops for drinks or mentions.
Oh, he's a raging alcoholic through this movie. I mean, very clearly. I
mean, when he phones his wife, he's got a 6-pack of beer that he's just bought, and it's like, this dude's having a great weekend away with this young woman, and then she's packed is a naughty negligee, which is hilarious as well, because that's all you need when you go away, isn't it? But yeah, he's a chain smoking, ass slapping, beer drinking 80s man. But he's still heroic. He's still, and he's trying to save the day.
Yeah, I mean, it's my take on it was they had set it up as between him being a workaholic and an alcoholic. Yeah, his wife had kicked him to the curb, and she's just kind of like, okay, you have to be in the kids' lives, but aside from that, I am very done with you.
He has got a terrible wife, again played by Nancy Loomis, who makes it 3 Halloween films in a row with this, because she was Annie in the first 2. And I guess they've aged her up to make her like the worst ex-wife ever. But she's like, everything he says, she goes, "Shut up, you're drunk."
But it also sets it up so that for the very end of the film, when he's calling and trying to get his wife, like, don't let the kids watch, and she's like, "I'm not going to listen to you. Like, we're not doing that. Yeah, I'm going to do the opposite of whatever you tell me to do." So in his own way, it, from a kind of thematic, if you want to apply that to this movie standpoint, like it sets something up with the character that's kind of a background thing, but in the end, it's going to end up destroying his kids. The real horror of what's happening with this. If he was a childless doctor,
wouldn't have such a thrust.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there is a major plot hole in this, though, which is like, obviously, we have different time zones. And I'm not quite sure if these masks are only sold in America. So I'm like, surely I can see, like, the East Coast or the West Coast being wiped out. But then wouldn't they have enough time to, like, warn the rest of the country? Because there's a couple of hours before.
I mean, my feeling on it was, it was going to be like any other live broadcast thing of like.
It's like the Gremlins thing where it's always going to be midnight somewhere,
Yeah.
English time zone.
Yeah. I mean, I just was willing to accept, like, if like a baseball game is on, the baseball game is on, it doesn't matter what time zone you're in. And that may be very unrealistic for Halloween programming on Halloween night, knowing kids are out, from 5 p.m. pretty much, to 8 p.m., in every time zone. And so they were doing it at like 9. So in 9 Pacific, which is what they would have been on, is midnight and would have been totally irrelevant to the kids in the East and Central time zones.
I mean, we're kind of like trying to rationalize this where they've stolen Stonehenge. So I don't think it's that important.
No.
But it's but I love the character of Cochrane, because I love how he does a great little kind of leer when he goes like, "I've got something for young Buddy" or something, or like when this American family, which again I feel like that's pure Nigel Neal, this annoying, almost like pre-Chevy Chase American family. Buddy, I'm Buddy, and this is Buddy Jr. And then it's like, and then of course, like he goes, "Oh, I've got a special surprise for Buddy Jr." And he just kind of leers to himself. It's like when nobody's looking. He's great.
What can you go over what Cochrane's explanation of Halloween was again?
Well, I can try. I mean, so I guess he's saying, he's kind of saying it goes back to Samhain as well, isn't he, really?
Yeah.
He's kind of saying like the last big festival was 3,000 years ago, where they sacrificed children and animals to the gods.
Yeah.
And then later on, he kind of says it's kind of not his responsibility. It's kind of out of his hands because the planets are in alignment. So the times come again. So I guess he's trying to just, wipe out the children as like the ultimate sacrifice to the old pagan gods.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything if I started going through his explanation, and I think that's as good as we're going to get. But
I think he just doesn't like children.
Yeah, it's kind of a wild movie because it doesn't. I read somewhere that some reviewer who said, and I like this movie, but it is anti-capitalism, anti-children, and anti-Irish.
Yeah.
Which I thought was like a really, like, Americans generally don't have, and that's where maybe you can feel the British influence on it is, everyone in America is like at least part Irish. So we tend not to have those same, sort of feelings about like, oh, let's villainize the Irish.
That's true, because even like IRA films kind of over here, it's almost like, no, they're not terrorists, they're freedom fighters kind of thing,
Yeah.
It's a lot more ambiguous. Well, anti-yuppie as well, I would throw in, because I feel like all the robots are prototype yuppies there, just hanging around. They're all dressed as businessmen, well-dressed businessmen. And maybe anti-technology even, because it's one of those magic computer films of the early 80s where if I've got a bit of Stonehenge and I've got some computers, I can create a magic circle or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, which actually, the ending of it is a little goofy. I have the passing thought of, so you guys are going to be watching this video, but you're going to keep some masks nearby and some, like you're doing this in the warehouse where you keep all this stuff. Like all that stuff should have shipped, October 1. It should not have been any, there shouldn't have been a mask left in the warehouse.
That's very true.
But, because if this is it, after this, whoever's alive is going to come burn this factory to the ground.
Do you think he wants to? Because I think in Nigel Neal's original draft, he was supposed to be a centuries-old demon. So I don't think he was actually a person. I actually prefer him being a person who just really believes in this stuff. But he seems fairly happy. Even when it goes wrong at the end, he's almost like, oh, okay, I'm being taken somewhere. I didn't plan this, but it's okay, kind of.
Yeah. I thought that was a really interesting little bit there.
Almost like Belloc in Raids of the Lost Ark. He's happy to kind of go out this way because it's proved his theory right a little bit.
Yeah, that was kind of how I was thinking of it, of like, oh, you've outwitted me, but this is all still going to happen. The dominoes have already fallen. Yeah. It's an interesting moment in a film that's a little more complicated, I think, than it seems when you describe it as yeah, Halloween masks are going to kill some kids, which is how I'd always heard about it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I watching it yesterday. I thoroughly enjoyed it again. And of course, again, it has crossovers. Carpenter's behind the scenes as producer again, and and had fingers on the script. He also did the music, and Dean Cundy again did the cinematography. So I feel like you watch the first three Halloween films, and they do feel from the same family. In fact, I've got a little story. About 10 years ago, I drove out of Austin, and I had the Halloween 3 soundtrack on my car radio, and surprisingly, you only drive a couple of miles out of Austin, and it turns into farmland and plowed fields. And I was doing this in October, and I had the Halloween 3 soundtrack going, and I'm like, this is immensely creepy. Actually, this is like like I'm driving into Santa Mira or wherever they go to.
Yeah, I don't know what the actual small town was. I saw they thanked a couple of towns in the credits, but yeah, it does have the kind of early. Now I feel like every horror movie is about the horrible things that'll happen to you if you leave the suburbs or the city.
Yeah,
and this one, they're doing it because these people need to be away from the prying eyes of the rest of the world and a town that Cochran can have completely taken over.
it's also like an early example of security cameras following people, and everybody's getting bugged and stuff that now we're kind of used to. Now it's like we all have that anyway. But like back in the 80s, it was like, that's my freedom of rights. That's Big Brother.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really early example of that kind of thing. I don't know if I'd seen something from that era that, I mean, I can't really think, even of the TV shows or anything, where it's not a far future thing where they're observing everybody in that kind of way. It all, the cameras in the town and all of that seemed kind of plausible.
I mean, I'm guessing a lot of the people in the town are androids, or at least they're on the payroll, because I feel like the homeless guy who doesn't know when to shut up, he's obviously one of the few people who maybe worked at the factory originally and got sacked when they replaced them all. And as opposed to everybody else, he hasn't moved out of town. He's just kind of hung around shouting abuse.
Yeah, and that was actually the first time I had thought maybe Halloween 3 had been intended for television until that guy's head was removed. That was my first indication that, never mind, this is a rated R horror movie. Because it's not like Atkins is running around shouting, F-bombs at people. And the credits, honestly, at the beginning felt like something that might have been on television at the time. I think that was an artifact of them trying to do this kind of digital opening that they did.
Yeah.
But
they're trying to do the pumpkin again, but I guess it's computerized this time, which kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And we should have talked about the opening with the pumpkin and the other one too, because I thought that was actually a very effective way to do the credits in that movie. But
well, yeah, and they're still doing that with David Green stuff now, because so the original Halloween just had a pumpkin, didn't it? The Carpenter one, and then Halloween 2 has a pumpkin that splits open and there's a skull inside, and then Halloween 3 has kind of like, we slowly work out with all this kind of computer animation coming on that it's like a digital pumpkin. It is actually the flashing pumpkin that's in the ad.
Yeah, and it's so primitive now. It looks like something you would have done on an Apple IIe in like 1984, and I'm sure in 1982 it was like, oh my god, this thing's amazing. Someone drew a pumpkin on a computer screen. The little jingle in it, I can only imagine. And I watched that In Search of Darkness documentary, and Tom Atkins was just laughing about, like, if you think you hate that jingle, just imagine being on the set. We're just walking around with that in our heads because it's in like every scene. And I think it's kind of effective in this, like, it becomes more menacing as, it goes from like, that's kind of weird to that's annoying to, oh my God, it's going to kill everybody, by the end of the film.
Yeah. And it's also the start of that. I mean, I think that was probably Nigel Neal as well, because it's kind of based on the tune to London Bridge is Falling Down. But I think, yeah, it's almost like also that style of the 80s oversaturation of pushing Pepsi or Coke, and you can't get away from certain adverts, which now we're kind of used to again. But back then that was kind of a new thing as well, I think.
Yeah. I mean, being kind of hyper aware of that and kind of being, it kind of becoming a punchline. Yeah. It was, you're pretty well into the period where, I mean, you had mass commercialization, and, the 70s had been pretty critical of that. But I think it was also the period where you're really starting to advertise at kids as mass consumers. Like the whole, like, we're going to advertise at teenagers was a new thing in the 50s and 60s. And then in the 70s and 80s was really when people started really advertising specifically at children, which was definitely kind of looked at with an arched eyebrow, which seems crazy now because everything now is aimed at children. But but at the time, I think it was like, oh, kids are consumers, so we need to hard sell them on breakfast cereal and everything else.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, like I say, watching this yesterday, I thoroughly enjoyed this. The only thing that kind of I guess I had qualms with was I feel like at the end, and I feel like I noticed this a few times before. So maybe when I was a kid, this didn't bother me, but maybe now I'm like, enough. Okay, I get it. Is where spoilers, like Ellie's character keeps coming back at the end, because I think she comes back 4 times in various states of disrepair, and I'm like, I guess it's let's move on.
I think that if the one thing I would have cut out of the film,
it's like pre-Terminator, actually, weirdly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you see the arm in the car when he gets back into it, I was like, dude, get rid of the arm and drive over it. But
there's a bit Bruce Campbell.
Yeah. But the thing I think would have been more effective in the film, if I can give notes to a film that is now 40 years old, is I wouldn't have shown the other salesperson or the lady who owned the shop in San Francisco actually zap herself. I would have just said, no, just have them hear something while they're having fun. And I do like Tom Atkins going like, shut up, keep going, He's
like, I'm having a good time.
Yeah. And then
he's like, I need a beer.
But it would have been just as sinister to just see all the guys in white coats, for them to hear something. And you already knew from, they've shown that woman was in that room.
Yeah.
Then just have them taking her away.
Well, funnily, the TV version is her just like messing around with the chip.
Yeah.
And then I think you do hear the noise. And the next thing is the guys turn up, so you don't see all the makeup work. Because I remember that always being cut out. And I remember thinking I must have seen that in one TV version, and then maybe they had a cut version.
Yeah.
Because for years I was like, I swear I didn't imagine that. But then maybe it was in the book. So until, so maybe for years I just read the book version. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's good in that it lets you know something has gone beyond it being a technological thing that's going to happen. Like it's technology mixed with magic because of the bug that comes
releases out. A doorway almost to like, almost like a bit like the Mist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of opens up a supernatural doorway, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it does kind of show that that's going to happen, and otherwise, when it would happen with the kid, it would have been. I would have put that a little further along into the movie. I would have had the woman disappear, them see her get taken away, and then maybe found another way to introduce the idea that this is going to be more than just a technical. We're going to fry the kid's brains or whatever.
I mean, I think that's probably the most shocking moment with the family in the test room. And because, you have this American family who are like hilariously annoying in an American way. But then you obviously switched to feeling sympathy for them because like they don't deserve this, and they were like, this is horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a real nightmare scenario, man. I mean, I can't think of another movie where we're going to just go ahead and murder children on screen like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, and that, again, if Tom Atkins didn't save the day at the end of the film, and kids are jumping up to change channels,
it's worked.
Yeah. So anyway, I definitely think, like, if you haven't seen it, or if it's been a while since you've seen it, this is one that's absolutely worth revisiting. It reminded me kind of being much more in the spirit of like In the Mouth of Madness, or one of those movies where things just keep getting worse. And then it ends and you're like, I don't think that got any better for anybody at the end of the movie.
Yeah. So, yeah. It's a great kind of 70s ending of like, did he manage it, or was it all over,
Yeah.
I totally agree. I mean, I would happily watch Halloween 3 again today. I think I would not want to watch Halloween 2. I think I'd rather watch paint dry. And the irony, like we said at the start, was, Halloween 2 was one of the biggest money makers of the year. Halloween 3 wiped out. I think it made like 40 million off like a 3 million budget. And it was totally steamrolled by Poltergeist and a bunch of other films that year. And kind of put, the Halloween franchise into dry dock for 6 years until like another company bought up the rights and relaunched Michael Myers again.
Yeah. I would have loved to have seen what they would have done next. It is interesting to hear it compared to Poltergeist, because Poltergeist is so big budget and so polished and Spielbergian, even though it's, different director. Yeah. It's Tobe
Hooper.
Yeah, I was going to invert all the syllables in that, but yes. I was at Hope Tooper. I was like, no, that's not right. But yeah, I think it's interesting because it does feel much more 70s than it feels 80s, and Poltergeist obviously feels super 80s. Kind of pointing the way forward towards that kind of stuff. Of course, it's also intended for a younger audience, but anyway, I would highly recommend rewatching it, and of course, just enjoying Tom Atkins. And I did think the woman who was in it, who played Ellie. I wanted to say Eileen. Ellie was really good. I'm kind of shocked. She worked kind of through the early 90s and then seems to do stuff real sporadically at this point. But
was she in some Woody Allen stuff? Mm-hmm. I think. Yeah.
She was in Bullets Over Broadway, at least. I saw that.
Yeah. No, she was good, because that was a pretty, again, not a particularly strong role, and I think she did it very well. Mm-hmm. I mean, towards the end, once he rescues her, even before she does something, I'm like, something's definitely up here. Because she's like, just looking at him and stuff. And I'm like, yeah. So that was a bit too signposted, but that's pretty more direction than her. But I think, you can laugh at the fact that she jumps into bed with, Tom Atkins pretty much straight away. But I think, she plays it very well. The scenes where she sees her dad's station wagon and stuff,
Yeah, it was kind of funny because I was thinking, because she is a flavor of the sexually aggressive female that was kind of new to film in kind of the like, I would say late 60s, that kind of carries through for a bit, and it kind of got turned into, like, if you watch Moonraker, it's ridiculous how they treat that kind of concept. But if in this movie, she just feels like a character who wants what she wants. And it's interesting because you can read it as, oh, they're making it so Tom Atkins is so desirable she can't help herself or something.
He is.
Giving hope to everyone everywhere. But
even the old matron at the hospital the staff fancies him. She's leaving cookies in the fridge.
That's right. Yeah, it does. It is funny because it does have the strawberry blonde tech who's like going for the stuff, who's also very into Tom Atkins.
Yeah, she's like, when are you going to have dinner with me again? He's like, I'm too busy drinking beer.
That'll cut into my Schlitz drinking time. I'm sorry.
My happy hour spends 12 hours.
But it does like it. The movie at least sets it up as she wants what she wants, and she's the one who's like, hey, there's only one bed here, so
yeah, I mean, he's not taking advantage, which is kind of cool for the time. Very kind of it's not like he's a dirty old man, really,
right,
because he's actually the one going, I can sleep in the car or I can sleep on the floor,
yeah,
so that's a nice touch.
Yeah.
Well, I can't think of anything else to say. If you want your fill of drunk doctors, these are the two films to watch.
This is sure. But yeah, I mean, I was pleasantly surprised by Halloween 3 and highly recommend it.
I'm very glad I watched them in that order, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, me too. All right, everybody. Well, happy Halloween. We'll be doing more sequels. That's the theme for this Halloween. Kind of sequels to classics. So we'll see what comes next. We're going to do, I think, 5 episodes. So
we should go. Halloween is here again. Only how many days until Halloween? Only 156 days to Halloween.
I think we are less than 100 days from Halloween right now.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
3 months, isn't it? Roughly 3 months. I think.
Yeah, I think the Elvira or somebody was like less than 100 days to Halloween, like about a week ago. So yeah. All right. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Bye.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.